Hey, welcome. Have you ever just felt stuck? Like you're facing the same battles over and over and not getting anywhere? Well, today we are digging into a really powerful teaching from Pastor Chris Oyakhilome that completely flips the script on that feeling. It's all about moving from victim to victor. Let's jump in.
It's a question that gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? If you're a person of faith, why do things still go so wrong? Why are there struggles with your career, your finances, your health? This teaching tackles that question head on, and honestly, the answer might just challenge everything you thought you knew.
So here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with what the sermon calls the permission principle. Then we'll look at some common escapist beliefs and contrast them with reality. After that, we'll get into the present truth, see how it applies to the world systems, and finally land on how your faith is the key to it all.
All right, let's get right to the core of this message. It all kicks off with one huge and, for a lot of people, pretty controversial idea about who is actually calling the shots in your life.
Wow, that's incredibly direct, right? The argument here is that any negative situation that keeps hanging around in your finances, in your family, in your business, it only continues because, on some level, you've given it permission. Now, that might be totally unconscious, but the teaching is really firm on this point. You are the gatekeeper. Okay, so that leads to a really important question. If we're the ones giving permission, why on earth would we do that? Well, this teaching suggests it's because many of us are operating under a set of beliefs that basically shift the responsibility off of our shoulders. Let's see how this works.
You've heard these before, right? The sermon calls them escapist mechanisms. They're the go-to explanations for hardship that, when you think about it, leave us feeling completely helpless. We blame God or we blame fate. And the argument is that these very phrases are the things that stop us from seeing our own authority and actually taking charge.
This brings us to a really critical distinction the sermon makes, the difference between a past truth and the present truth. So the past truth might be that humanity was helpless at one point, but the present truth, the reality for right now, is that you can walk out of that bondage anytime you want. It's like a debt that's been paid off. The debt was real, sure, that's a past truth, but if you kept trying to make payments on it today, you'd be living in a reality that just doesn't exist anymore.
And to make this crystal clear, the sermon uses this amazing analogy. Picture an insect in a glass jar with a lid on it. At first, it jumps and jumps, trying to get out, but it just keeps hitting its head on the lid. Over time, it gets conditioned. It learns there's a ceiling it can't break through. But then, someone takes the lid off. The path is clear. But what does the insect do? It keeps jumping, but only to the height where the lid used to be. It's trapped by a limitation that doesn't even exist anymore.
So if the lid is off the jar, what exactly is this present truth that changes everything? Well, according to this teaching, it's all rooted in a very specific understanding of what happened through the death and resurrection of Jesus.
The key word here is paralyze. The teaching points out that the original Greek word that sometimes gets translated as destroy actually means something more like to render ineffective or to make powerless. So the idea isn't that Satan was wiped out of existence, but that he was completely stripped of his power and authority. He's been neutralized.
So think about it. If he's been paralyzed, made ineffective, what does he have left? According to this teaching, he's only got one weapon left in his entire arsenal: deception. His whole game plan now is to lie to you. It's to convince you that the lid is still on the jar, to make you believe that you're still trapped, still powerless, and still a victim.
Okay, but how does all this spiritual reality connect with the very real, tangible problems we see all around us? A crazy economy, social problems, all of it. The sermon's answer is that as a believer, you're operating under a totally different administration, a whole new system. To explain this, the teaching dives into two Greek words, both translated as world. The first one is aeon. The best way to think about this is like the spiritual operating system of an age. It's the unseen structure and the way of thinking that dictates how everything runs.
And the second word is cosmos. Now, this is the tangible world you can see and touch. The nations, the economies, the governments, the way society functions. The cosmos basically runs on the programming of the aeon. The system of the age controls the order of the world.
And right here, this is the game changer. The sermon points to this declaration from Jesus: I have overcome the world, the cosmos. The interpretation is powerful. Believers are no longer subject to this world's failing systems. That means you don't have to be a victim of a bad economy. You don't have to be a victim of political instability. Why? Because you're living under a completely different kingdom's rules.
So this all leads us to the final and maybe most important part of the whole message. I mean, knowing all this is one thing, but how do you actually live this way? How do you really, truly live like the lid is off the jar? And the answer, according to the sermon, is simple. It's your faith. Faith is the instrument. It's the title deed. It is the spiritual currency you use to take possession of the victory that Christ already won for you. It's how you take something that is true in the Spirit and make it your reality right here, right now.
So what does this actually look like day to day? The teaching gets really practical here. First, stop talking about defeat and hardship like they're your permanent address. Instead, speak directly to your circumstances. Devil, in the name of Jesus, take your hands off my finances. Refuse to just be a victim of the way things are. And this is huge. Learn to operate from your spirit, from what you know to be true, not just from what your five senses are telling you.
And that brings us to the final, piercing question from the sermon, which actually echoes a question from way back in the book of Genesis. Who told you that you were naked? The challenge here is to question the source of your reality. Who told you that you were broke? Who told you that you were sick? Who told you that you were defeated? Was it the facts? Was it your bank account? Or was it the great deceiver still trying to convince you the lid is on the jar? The teaching leaves us with this powerful idea. The second you realize you've been listening to the wrong voice, you can change the conversation and reclaim your victory.